We can have Mark Fetterman, and so the first group is going to be about Publicy, the theme being how do you reconcile the public and the private in the present fully connected world, and Mark Fetterman and his group have a solution. Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you, Derek. As Derek said, I'm Mark Fetterman. They've swept the sawdust off the floor from the bar. They cleaned up really quickly. At home, they never clean up the bars like that, although I've been thrown out of a couple in my time. So we were looking at the issue of Publicy, and throughout the conference, we have seen many, many examples of people talking about the problem of Publicy. So what is this thing? So in our contemporary world, Publicy is the formal reversal of privacy. Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook says privacy is dead. And what's replaced it is a translucency that occurs when our identity is co-created through how we show up, our regular identity that we know of and have known of for millennia. It's comprised also of our social media information that we share, so we have partial control over that. We share it with our people in our social network, and they make meaning about our identity based on what we put out. And it's constructed algorithmically by big data databases over which we have no control, that it's collected by the clickstream from our mobile devices, by health information, governments, tax information, and so forth. And this is a vast amount of data. And they can put a picture together of my identity that may or may not resemble me. So Publicy asks certain key questions, and we're probing these questions in our group. It says, how do we know these multiple instances of ourself? It asks, how can we protect ourselves against becoming a tradable commodity over which we have very little control? It says, how can we create a critical pedagogy? And by that I mean, how do we understand the relationships of power that exist in these databases? How do we understand who has voice, who is marginalized, who even exists in these databases, and who has privilege, who has control, who gets the money? In other words, if we were to meet ourselves in a dark cyber alley, would we like the identity or the multiple identities that we meet? And in fact, could we even recognize the one we meet in the dark cyber alley? So we took these questions and we applied both an informal, formal analysis to these. And this analysis was invented many, many years ago by Marshall McLuhan. Just show of hands, who recognizes the name Marshall McLuhan? So some of you do, most of you don't. Marshall McLuhan came up with the expression, the medium is the message. Does that ring a bell? Came up with the idea of global village. And he came up with these ideas in the mid-1960s. Years before the first two computers ever exchanged a byte of data, he wrote a book called Understanding Media, which predicted the effects of the world we now live in. And so we had these four properties that apply to all things that we conceive or create. And so we used this framework, among some other analysis, to figure out this idea. So Publicy obsolesces or sets aside the right to privacy. Mark Zuckerberg made that really, really clear. It enables or enhances the right to be forgotten, the initiative that was done in the European Union. In my personal opinion, it's a bit laughable because it's not practical in the world of Publicy, but it enables this idea of the right to be forgotten. It brings back or retrieves another model, which is a person's right to their medical files. Now, in Canada, where I live, it used to be that your medical files were owned by the doctor or the clinic or the hospital. And you didn't have access to your own medical records. This has been the way, since I was growing up. Recently, the legislation has changed that says a person's medical records belong to the individual. And the individual must give permission to the doctor, the clinic, the hospital to access those medical records. So it's a complete flip of that, of the way it was. And so now I can release parts of my medical records to some doctors but not others. When I go into the hospital for treatment, I actually have to sign explicit permission. So now in Canada, we have the right to own our medical records. So this is brought back in this idea that in this idea that says we have the right to our own data. And this reversal, the right to our own data that's now owned by others, is really the way of the future. And so what we did, we said, what is the effect of this Publicy data? Now, in the early days of the internet, it was widely known that the internet, the acceleration of our communication, takes us from consumers into producers. We used to consume media, and now we produce media. And in fact, McLuhan said, if the medium is the message, the user is the content. And indeed, we fill up the internet with all sorts of content. There's no shortage of that. The internet would be totally empty without us providing all sorts of stuff. Publicy effect goes one better. It says we now produce and we become the products. And this idea of us becoming products is not a new one. Advertisers have been doing this all the time. You watch television, and you are sold to the advertiser. You're sold to Unilever or Procter & Gamble or Coca-Cola or whoever. That's the value exchange. You get television, they get the commodity. The Publicy effect accelerates this, that we become the product, and in fact, we become the commodity. And the way this happens is through our data stream. We identified a group of entities that we call data gladiators. And these data gladiators, you can imagine the gladiators with the big swords and the chainmail fighting it out for ownership of us. Because Publicy says we are, our identity is the data stream, the amalgamated data stream of stuff we put out, the databases and so forth. That is us. And if you ever try to apply to a bank, you ever try to go to a border, they know your data stream. They know more about you than you probably know about yourself. So the data gladiators are in contention, competing to own us. And they fight. So who are these data gladiators? Well, there's a group of them that are in the social ad network, right? So you recognize some of those names. They collect all sorts of data, and their business strategy of these companies is entirely about getting more data. So Facebook, internet.org, it's a business strategy to get more data. Why did they pay, what was it, $13 billion for WhatsApp? To buy a whole community. The data gladiators are the content providers. Netflix, Spotify know an awful lot about what you like and the type of person you are by what you watch. So they get to know you. So that's a different aspect of the data. The commerce providers, like Amazon, know a heck of a lot about what you consume, how often you consume it, and in fact, they're working towards delivering you more goods before you even run out. And in fact, we were looking at one thing, there's a Tide button, you know, Tide detergent? You can buy a Tide button that you attach to your washing machine, and when you're running low detergent, you push the button, an hour later in certain cities, Tide will be delivered to your door, right? So they know all sorts of things about your life through your consumption. Now, the guys who aren't winning so much, the hardware providers, they thought if we provide the hardware, then we'll get the control. Turns out that all these other people have outflanked them. So the hardware providers are trying to get in, back into this data stream because that's the value. Services providers, that's a different way of understanding you. So Uber, they know where you live. They know where you go. Airbnb, they know where you live when you're not living at home and what type of housing you want. Hugely valuable information. The guys who come in last in this race, by the way, who are, they were the big data gladiators, no longer, are the big carriers. And they were very content. They said, if we control the pipes, we control the data. And it turns out all of that was bypassed, and the common carriers, because of the rules of common carrying, are out of the picture. They don't get any data whatsoever. They just transport it from here to there, and they're left holding the bag. The strategy of the data gladiator economy is this. If you own the community, you own exclusive access to that data stream, and you own the users. So that's why Facebook is going through its strategy to try to outflank Google, particularly in emerging economies. They want to become a verb. To Google this, you're going to tweet that, you're going to Instagram this picture. So they want to know, they want you to know to think of them first. So again, they own mind share. These guys want to become the Kleenex of the internet. And what they've realized is that the user data streams are the basis of the new economy. The commodity is no longer cash, it's about the user data. And it turns out that we have struck a very, very bad bargain. They say, well, you know, we're going to give you free access. We're going to give you access to your social network. We're going to allow you to buy stuff, watch these movies, and all you have to do is give us a little bit of data. That's pretty good, eh? And that was the same deal that the Europeans struck with the First Nations people, the Aboriginal people in North America. They said, give us those furs that are all over the place, and we'll give you, a little bit of metal. Here's a nice tool. Here's something shiny. Give us there's this land you're not using, that we'll take it for just a little bit of money, and of course now it's New York, right? There's an asymmetric exchange of value going on here, my friends. An asymmetric exchange of value. We are giving what today is the basis of the entire world economy. Governments run on it, corporations run on it, all of it, and we're giving it up just so I can post the beautiful picture of Ars Electronica on Facebook. An asymmetric relationship of value. We are the commodity. We are valuable, we have value, and they want it. So here's a modest proposal. We create a Publicy key, similar to PGP, public-private key, that attaches automagically to all our data streams, right? Goes to our phone, Facebook posts, pictures, everything. Automagically, our key attaches. And then that enables us to create transactions based on releasing that key or not to unlock pieces of our user data. It's managed securely through the blockchain technology, and it allows us to create a new market economy that includes all sorts of new business to help us manage these keys, to negotiate these keys, trade them, and so forth. So a whole new market economy based on trading user information that we ourselves control. The individual enjoys a granularity of control. I can release certain information or not. I can do it in aggregate. I can do it through a single consistent set of interactions. And even though my individual data may not be valuable as one quantum, collected in a marketplace together with a bunch of people has tremendous value that we can negotiate. The data gladiators, on the other hand, they enjoy a very simplification of the privacy problems that they have. It's a universal, open set of APIs. They can develop to them. New application developers can develop to them. Everybody can be included in this economy. You don't need to be a Facebook or a Google or an Apple. So what we now do is we create a cookbook of the self. This is a set of applications, of videos, of posts, of all sorts of tools and so forth that now enable us to understand what's going on. It allows us to take control, allows us to play with it, allows us to meet new people and aggregate our value. In the cookbook of the self, it strives towards achieving a critical mass among all of us, much in the same way that the Creative Commons movement grew up. And especially if this is adopted by the hardware vendors and the common carriers, who, by the way, are the ones who are losing this race, so they have an interest in developing for this, then we will get a critical mass of users. Critical mass of users create a de facto technical standard that gives political will that will allow regulations that will bring the real data gladiators into line. So that's what we developed within one day. It's just a brief outline. It's a modest proposal. We use some very powerful facilitation techniques to do it. Here are the participants of the group. There are several of them who are here. Others had to catch a plane. And we hope that this will be indeed the start of an implementation for something that allows us to take back control.